Welcome to episode 119 of The Route presented by White Whale Marketing. The Route is a glorified sports business coffee chat that has a new guest every episode as they share their experiences and route in sports. As always, I'm Christopher Nascimento, and let's get started. Before we begin and get into today's guest, just a couple things to cover. First off, if you haven't already, check us out on social media. So that's at The Route Sports. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see here it says at The Route Sports. And we're on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, everything. You can find us there. We have clips every week of maybe snippets from the episodes, as well as magazine covers showing, hey, this is this week's guest. So check us out there and feel free to follow us there. In addition to that, if you haven't already, please take the time to subscribe to the podcast or follow wherever you're on. We're on all major podcast networks, including Amazon, Apple, Google, Spotify, etc. And as I mentioned, we're on YouTube underneath the White Whale Marketing YouTube channel. There we have the route playlist, so you can see all of our latest episodes in video form, and you can follow along whether you're cooking, doing this or that. But it's a good thing to see. So check us out there and take the time to do that. Now, with that said, let's get into today's guest. I'd now like to welcome someone who started in minor league baseball and then dived straight into strategy and partnerships. Now being in one of the most exciting spaces in sports, senior manager of brand and partnerships at BetRegal, Maz Nassif. Welcome to the route. How's it going?
I'm good, man. How you doing, Chris?
Yeah, not too bad. Thank you for joining me, and I'm excited to kind of get into your route because we had a great conversation prior to recording.
Thank you for having me, man. It's a pleasure being here, and I'm excited to have a conversation with you and see where this goes.
Perfect. Yeah. So as I mentioned, and as people have seen throughout all these, 119 episodes of the podcast, the way I like to start every podcast is just where did the route begin? So how did this career start? And maybe take us to how you got into the position you're in today.
For sure, man. I think so. I was thinking about this actually and trying to figure out where did it all start. And to be really honest with you, it started at a Jays game many years ago. So I came to this country as an immigrant. I did not really speak the language. I was still trying to get my foot under me as a, I think it was like an 11-year-old, 10-year-old, trying to get my foot under me. And I went to a Jays game in an elementary school. And it was one of my first experiences at a sporting event. And one thing I realized is I was watching Carlos Delgado come up to bat, and I saw all these people cheering for him. Doesn't matter like what race, what color, what gender, anyone. They were all just cheering for him, and I was like, oh my god, like this is actually pretty fascinating. At a young time, at a young age, sorry, it was one of those things where I looked at it as I'm like, why is it? And it just got me fascinated. It's like, what is this guy doing? What is he? Why are so many people enamored by him? What is it that people love about him? So then Carlos Delgado, as you now imagine, became one of my favorite players of all time. And that was what piqued my interest into the world of sports and just becoming, just having to do something in sports. I started playing baseball. I wanted to go down and become a great baseball player, as we all do at one point. Sadly, I realized that my ball skills weren't there, and I sort of veered away from that and started realizing, okay, I still want to be in sports. I still want to be part of sports, and that's when I started understanding a bit more of how sort of sports works, whether it's athlete representation, whether it's marketing, how those elements work. So what I decided was that, and this was around, I would say, late middle school, early high school. I decided I'm like, I want to be part of sports business. I need to figure out how I want to be part of sports business. I was lucky enough to have a gym teacher that was very into the sports realm, into the sports sphere, and he sort of opened my eyes to the concept of, hey, like what you can do is, and he's like, you seem like you're very interested. What you can do is you can become a lawyer and essentially do sports management. That's what a lot of some lawyers do. It's a contract law and so on and so forth. So I was like, you know what? That's it. That's what I want to do. I want to be a sports agent. I started researching all the sports agents. I started watching everything that there is about sports agents, and I was in love. I was like, this is what I want to do. I was telling my mom and dad that I want to do that. My mom and dad, being immigrants, I will be honest with you, didn't fully understand it, but they did hear lawyer in front of it, and they loved it. So like, okay, great, lawyer, that's good. Go do that. So high school, sort of, my whole high school was about becoming a lawyer. Sorry, going to university to become a lawyer, to become a sports agent. I get into university. I start going down that route of becoming a lawyer. The whole time, only doing it because I want to be in sports, not because I love to go into and represent, like, a, let's say, a criminal or prosecute someone. That's not what I want to do. What I really wanted to do was just do sports. So being in university kind of opened my eyes, because now as I'm older and I'm starting to talk to different people, talk to more individuals that are in the space, I'm starting to realize that there's like different angles to sports. It's not just you don't have to go and become an agent. Not and To be very frank, agents aren't making the greatest amount of money. It's like everyone thinks like, every agent is from, what's the show, Ballers, and they're doing phenomenal, and it's like just raking in the money. So I started realizing that. So I'm like, you know what? Can I go down that route and do it? I still wanted to do it. I still wanted to do law. So I went down the route almost up until my last year of university, where I got my LSATs done, did everything there was to do for sports, like sorry, for law school. Got my LSATs done, had my application ready, did everything, and was like, okay, I'm gonna go to law school. It was right before November. I had to submit my application, and they were just talking to people. I started realizing I'm like, maybe there's other opportunities and different ways of doing it. And one good conversation I had was with this individual from MLSC, Heidi Picorni. I still remember her name, phenomenal individual. I was doing a activation at for one of the companies I worked for at the time, and she goes to me. She goes, honestly, I've heard you talk about sports nonstop, like the whole weekend. You've talked about sports, like sports. And I was like, yeah, I love it. I love everything about it. And she told me what she does, and she worked on the All Star game when it was in the when it was here. She's worked on different activations in the sports and entertainment realm, and she said, there's other opportunities and different ways to go about it other than law school. Because that's what I told her. I'm like, I'm trying to do law school, and so she opened my eyes up to the George Brown program. And basically the goal here was is like, I'm putting my application in for law school. I still got to wait for a year until I'm starting law school. So maybe we go ahead and try this program out for a year. If anything, it just helps me understand a bit more about the sports business landscape, and it helps me make a network that is probably going to come in handy down the road. So I decided, you know what, I'm going to do the program. It was a postgraduate program at GBC. Did the program, and that's when I realized, I'm like, okay, no, wait a second, I don't need to go to law school. There's this other angle of sports business that I can take that is, personally, has been a lot more fruitful, and a lot more enjoyable, because it taps into things that I really love, which is sports and entertainment, of course. But then there's also a aspect of culture, an aspect of creativity, aspect of analytics that I really really enjoy. Whereas when I analyzed it, I'm like, if I went down the law school route and did the sports management and so on and so forth, yeah, there could be some of that, but I would have to, one, hit gold as it pertains to an individual to really, make everything work. But then also, will I have the ability, or have the time to be able to be creative and do all these other things when it pertains to some of my clients? So that's sort of the route as it pertains to the moment I decided that I want to do sports business. And what kind of sports business? Going to George Brown College, and then from George Brown College, honestly, the rest of it has been, um, almost like a little bit of a linear progression. I would say, in the sense that it went from going to George Brown, getting my internship. I will say that I was lucky in the internship that I got, because it allowed me, to do a lot of work that my other I found that other students weren't able to do, just because of the kind of organizations they had gone to. So I was able to learn a lot, do a lot, and then I leveraged that internship to another role, and to another role, and to another role, and then that's how I ended up here at BetRegal, managing the partnerships realm. Um, and I can go a little bit deeper into sort of how I got into partnerships versus anything else in the sports business as well. But I'll leave it to you to follow up if there's anything on that front at first.
Yeah, no, that's kind of a great way to start, and we'll definitely kind of get into it more. But it's funny enough how, every week there's a different guest, but there's so many different things when they kind of share their route initially. Like, hey, like I align with that so much, right? Where
Mhm.
you're saying about, like, sports huge impact on you as a kid, and then I also kind of thought, hey, like I'm going to be in sports around high school, right? But I didn't really know what that meant. And similar to you, everyone then starts thinking about agents. So my dad was introducing me to some of his lawyer friends to kind of, let me know what it's like being a lawyer.
Mhm.
And then they were all telling me, they're like, yeah, like sure, it sounds glamorous, but they're like, realistically, you have to work underneath someone to become a sports agent. And then not until 40, you have the chance to start making the bucks. That's when you get the clients. And they're
Mhm.
saying this all to me. I'm like, hey, like this doesn't necessarily make sense, because I want to live a life, right? I don't want to essentially be scraping for pennies until I'm 40. So then I was kind of stuck, right? I thought the only thing like you was to become a sports agent, to become Jerry Maguire.
Yeah.
And the other thing, the other thing that made me laugh there is you mentioned ballers, and as I
Yeah.
said to you before we started recording, I started school in accounting, but
Hmm.
still with that sports mindset, I was like, hey, if I can't be an agent, why not just become a financial advisor for athletes like ballers? So that was my initial
Hey.
idea
Yeah. Yeah.
for an agency, but then obviously things come about. You learn more as you were mentioning there. You have these different conversations, and you're like, oh wow, like there's this whole different angle I never realized, and that's very interesting. One of the things I kind of want to kind of maybe get into before we kind of get into your different roles a little more
Yeah.
specifically was um like while you're in school. I know you said all the way until the very end you did your LSATs and that was kind of the path you're going to go down. But while in school, were you ever maybe a part of programs or different things like that that you realized, hey, like this allowed me to really build a strong base that has allowed you to grow from there?
So in, I would say, I was part of a lot of Frosh Week related events,
Yeah.
planning Frosh Week, being creative from a partnerships angle. To be really honest with you, like I think back to it, I actually had a conversation with a individual that is whose brother is now an O chair at one of the colleges that I was part of, sorry, university college that I was part of, and he was like, "Hey, like, how did you guys end up getting that Red Bull partnership?" And I was like, "Oh shit, I didn't even thought of that." I'm like, I totally blanked out that it was moments like those that really made me realize that that's the kind of things that I love. It's like creating a deck, putting together ideas on, hey, why you should partner with us, what you should do, sorry, how we can make that partnership become great, how it's beneficial to both parties, things like of that nature, or what I really found fascinating. And what I noticed that I was doing in university when I was part of those organizations, and then beyond that, it was being part of just I would say uh, being part of sports related groups. So we had like a group that was related into that focused heavily on NBA free agency. We would get together and I went to York University. We used to get together in Scott Library and just discuss like how salary caps are created and how salary caps are moved and how things are sort of dictated in a certain way, to make sure that revenue is coming in and then players can be signed for this, players can be signed for that, how to manipulate certain things. Like we would literally think we're like GMs as much as we play fantasy. Like we would literally think we're GMs, and it was moments like that where I found people that were like minded as myself, and talking to them more often than not, and discussing things that I found were just cool, to be honest with you, at the time. And to be very honest, I will say that I wasn't part of any um, I guess you could say school oriented program, where I was like when I was at York University, where I was like, okay, you know what, I'm gonna go in and we're gonna talk about XYZ, we're gonna talk about this, we're gonna talk about this, pertaining to sports business. At the time there wasn't anything, to be really honest. Now I know York has a better sports program. At the time there wasn't. So we were just doing it amongst ourselves. We're just shooting the shit, for lack of a better term, and just having conversations with one another, and seeing that we had some cool ideas and we had some cool ways of marketing an athlete, or marketing something, or partnering up with something, um, and things of that nature, or really helped. What really got me into it after and having more of like you could say like a curriculum, was the George Brown Sport and Event Marketing Program. That's where I started noticing, okay, there's like an actual process to these things. There's like what we were doing, we were we were just scratching the surface, but there's an actual process of like, okay, how do you build out a deck? How do you pitch? How do you take analytics and bring it into a creative idea? How does analytics and creativity go hand in hand? Those are the things that I really did learn by being in a program that was really geared towards teaching us that. And then even beyond that was the fact that we sort of stepped outside the box to network a lot, and to have conversations with different individuals, and really chat with them, and pick their brain. And a little bit of what you're doing right now is pick their brain, understand how they think about certain things. How does their business think about certain things? How does the organization think about certain things? And that really has helped as well in sort of um, creating, giving myself a better understanding of how to go about a conversation with someone, when I'm trying to convey something, or when I'm trying to, let's say, in my space, get a partnership to become a reality.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. Where kind of similar alignment there, where I kind of went to school, I switched into marketing afterwards, and it was fully into the business program, so there wasn't that sports element within it. But like you, right? You're going to the library, talking with your friends, or meeting with people, and then you're using your own experiences to kind of gain that knowledge you needed within sports, right? Where I remember I started taking courses and I was convincing all my groups to, hey, let's go do a marketing strategy for badminton Canada, which
Mhm.
has now helped me get them as a client years later. But I was trying to find any ways I could within my classes to put that sports twist in it to get that experience or even just kind of build that knowledge on it. So I definitely understand that and see the benefit within it. And before we kind of get into George Brown specifically, um, when you were talking about that MLC exec that kind of opened your eyes, was that prior to George Brown, afterwards, and what was that event and how did that come about?
It was prior to George Brown. So what had happened was, I was working. I was like brand ambassador work. Well, actually, I was bartending at a bar, and they essentially threw together a event in the Wine and Spirit I think it was called Wine and Spirit Festival, if I'm not mistaken. And they did did a whole activation there. I was one of the bartenders. I was there for the whole weekend, and that whole interaction came about because she was just watching me talk, and like she was very sweet, just watching me talk to different individuals. And we were just, when you put a group of people from different sort of walks of life, similar age group, we just started talking about like, oh, what are you doing in school, what are you trying to do, so on and so forth. And I was just talking about the sports thing now, and I got really passionate about it. And I was like, yeah, like I want to do this, I want to do this, I want to do like, sports stuff, I want to be in the sports space. And I think that's when she sort of, it piqued her interest, because she sort of has gone down that road, and she probably looked at me and she said, hey, listen, this guy probably thinks that there's only one way of going about and doing it. Let me just, give him 5 minutes, 10 minutes, just have a chat. And that was sort of where that started. It was just that chat of, hey, there is the route of course, going down the law school approach, but then there was also another approach that you can take that may be more fruitful for you. That was exactly what it was for her. Was that, to be quite honest with you, it was saving me a lot of money, because law school isn't cheap. But then beyond that, it was making sure that I don't do something that I didn't like, but thought that I needed to do it. And so just that conversation, and to this day, I still carry that forward when I talk to different people, is to let them know, if they come to me with that same approach that I came to her with, to be able to let them know, it's like, hey, I 100%, that is an approach, but here's another approach as well, in case you haven't seen it, in case you haven't thought about it. But that's how that whole thing came about. It was just me not shutting up, and me just constantly talking about sports, and what I was wanted to do and what I was gonna do, and her just taking a little bit of an interest in me, and wanting to open up my eyes to the other possibilities within the space.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I guess kind of building on it from there, right? You have touched on George Brown, the impacts it had, and the things you're able to learn from it. So what then took place afterwards? If I'm not mistaken, they have you do an internship, correct, at George
Yeah,
Brown? Yeah.
yeah.
So how did the internship about, and then how did that process begin from there, where you kind of dove into a different lane?
Yeah, no, 100%. So that internship, it was funny. So I got an internship from, the initial internship I wanted, I didn't get. The other internship, like my second internship, I did get, but it was non-paid. And I couldn't do non-paid, sadly, just because I had circumstances where I had to make sure that I'm able to, at least get down there. I wasn't living downtown. All these different factors made a big difference. And then there was a choice for me. Essentially, it was this very reputable organization, or it was not as much of a, I wouldn't say they were a reputable organization, but I would say not a more boutique agency, that wasn't at the same level as this other organization. And so my thing came down to is looking at the, well, SBX was the area, the company that I went and interned in. Looking at them, I love the fact that I would be super hands on. So I decided to go with them. I decided to go and become really super hands on and just learn as much as I could, because I thought that that was going to benefit me more in the long run, because of the fact that I'll be down in the trenches. I'll be doing it all. I'll be cold calling. I'll be creating decks. I'll be doing all of that fun stuff. And that's literally what it was. It was literally that. I was super excited for that, and once I did that, it gave me the belief and the relief, to be really honest with you, to be like, okay, no, I can do this. Now I need to go out and start networking more and looking for other opportunities. And I think going from that to my other position, and to be very honest with you, all my positions, I would say networking has had an element in it. The internship that I landed at SPX came through me networking with an individual that worked there, and having a coffee, just chatting with them, letting them know what I want to do, them letting me know what they do, how they got to where they got to, and that really helped in me creating enough of a relationship to be put forward just enough from a resume standpoint to be considered. My next gig after that, so finished the internship, went back to George Brown, finished George Brown Strong. We did a great event we have like a end of year event that we did. We did a great event, uh, rocked that out, and then that was when I was okay. Now it's time for me to go and look for a job. And that's when I started again going back into my network, sorry, and started just reaching out to individuals for coffee. Had a coffee with my boss, well, sorry, my future boss at the time. Had a coffee with her, just connected with her, chatted with her. One thing that I think and I think she even mentioned it to me at one point was I tried to figure out what were the problems that I could potentially solve if there was anyone to come into a role. What are the problems that you could potentially solve? And I took that and I sort of ran with it in determining, okay, like here's what the needs are, and here's how I can potentially fulfill or help with those needs. I'm not going to be, of course, coming out of school, not going to be the person that's going to be able to do um, everything, but I'll be able to do these major things and focus on those major things. Whether it was deck build, I think at the time was like deck building, research, and the ability to put everything together in a concise manner. So those were the things that sort of I highlighted heavily, and that landed me that job. And that job, it was really interesting because at that time I started on in January, and by I think it was October, maybe not even October. Both my so my first the person that hired me left the company. Her boss left the company. So then I went from that to essentially being having to report in within like 3 months of being there, having to reporting to someone new, and having to create a new rapport, create a new approach to working, ways of working, and things of that nature. So that person was there for another, I think, 3 or 4 months, and that person then left, and then I was basically left almost alone in an island by myself, working on a bunch of the big projects for the agency. And I think that was like a moment that I had where I was like, okay, look, I can actually do this, and that's when I started having more belief in myself, even more, to be like, okay, I can do this. I've handled this situation, the different changes that have happened, and that gave me more of like a ability to push a bit further, push a bit out of my boundaries, and really learn more. And so there, I really started focusing on strategy, because I saw it as being something that I really loved. From like the standpoint of it's of course its their strategy is really analytical, but I wanted to give a twist to it, and I also wanted to be involved in the creative elements of that strategy development. I had a little bit of opportunities at that agency to do it, not as much, just because there was processes that need to be respected, which I totally understand. So that's when I sort of realized and determined that okay, I want to sort of progress a bit further into the strategy realm, while still being as creative as possible with clients and with brands. And then COVID happened, to be honest with you, and COVID happened, and COVID led one thing to another, and it was just trying to figure out and stay afloat type of time. And I saw an opportunity that came up at MediaCom, and that opportunity seemed like the perfect place for me at the time, in the sense that it was like it had a strategy elements to it, but it was very creative elements as well. Um, Being super creative with the brands that they worked with at the time, and that was like my thing. I was like, you know what, I want to do this. That again came from another networking opportunity that I had, where my former boss at T1 agency introduced me to the individual from MediaCom just before, just like to have a coffee and just like connect and just chat. And long behold, that connection comes back, and he's like, "Hey, like, oh, I'm like, hey, you guys are looking for someone," and one thing led to another, and then I got the position at MediaCom and started there, and loved MediaCom, loved everything that my team loved everything there. Um, and then this last opportunity, honestly, was more so just a knock on the door of the sports betting space coming. into Canada and looking for different individuals in the space, and it was more of a uh, recruitment effort, and it piqued my interest because it's a new space. I love the space. It sounds very intriguing, and I wanted to learn as much as possible. And now I'm here at BetRegal managing the partnership elements of the organization that have to deal with strategy, execution, activations, XM. So it's a little bit of everything that I learned in my last like 3 roles, I would say, all put together in one location. But instead of working on multiple brands, I work on one brand. And so, sometimes, yeah, people can say, okay, like that gets a little bit repetitive, but I personally love it. I personally love that I can own a brand and I can sort of control and with my team, of course, control and determine its voice, its look, its feel, how consumers will connect with it, how consumers will see it and view it. So those are the things that I love about where I'm at now, and sort of how everything that I did in the past built up to this, I guess, crescendo of a moment.
Yeah, there's so many things that I kind of want to get into because there's so much great insight. Where just at the beginning of that, you were just kind of mentioning how you had that, let's say, fork in the road, right? Reputable company or internship opportunity, or this maybe more startup scrappy area where you'd get your hands dirty more. And obviously, that's a hard thing to consider because a lot of people, maybe within sports, have to determine that, right? Where I think like the route you went is kind of a great one. Where I remember I spoke to someone when I was in university as well, and they kind of just gave me the comparison of being a marketing manager at a hockey team in Britain is
Mhm.
still a marketing manager anywhere else, right? But then you just have that experience at a smaller area where you have more hands-on experience, and then you just transfer that into a bigger role, and it's much easier to climb and get more experience at these roles. So I think that's very intriguing. And when you're saying about the belief, right, in yourself, right, where kind of came about where you're almost like forced into that situation, is that
Mhm.
something you find where not only yourself, but you would recommend others to always maybe shoot for positions that you are not necessarily a fit for at the moment, but you can kind of grow into it, right? It allows you to grow.
I would 100%. 100%. So it's a short answer, 100%. The long answer, and I'll give you a story here really quickly. I was talking to someone like about I would say a year ago, and I was just talking to them, and I was like, hey, and they're super skilled at what they do, amazing at what they do. And I'm like, hey, like you've been at X location for a while. Like, what's going on? Like, what's new? What's happening? And just we're just catching up. So I was like, what's new? What's happening? And they were like, "Oh, like yeah, like I'm really happy where I'm at with what I'm doing." I'm like, so what's like the next step? Like, are you? He's like, "Oh no, like I'll see where it goes." And to me, I think that that's one of the, and this is a close friend of mine, so I told him straight up, I'm like, you need to not see, you need to go push. You need to push yourself. You need to push for a role that if you believe in yourself and your skill sets. And I'm like, do you believe in your skill sets? And he's like, well, of course. Like I've put out some great work. I've done some great work. I've culminated great clients for the business. So I'm like, so what's the issue then? Why is it that you're not pushing for it? And I think what that opened my eyes a little bit to the fact that the biggest enemy to a lot of people is their own selves. To be really honest with you, is because some people, I guess, get enamored and get caught up sometimes in, I would say, the linear projection that they have to go through. And far too many people believe that that linear projection is controlled by other individuals and not just by themselves. And what I mean by that is like you need to go out and fight for what you believe you're worth. At the end of the day, if you know that your work is worth X, you should go and ask for X. If you feel that you're not being given the right opportunities, you should go ask for those opportunities. And to that point that you were making is I 100% encourage everyone to go out and ask for more opportunities within the organization, or within any circumstance that they're in, because it only will help them develop. And that development in the long run is going to be more beneficial to them and the company, of course, but it's going to be more beneficial to them, even if it doesn't translate to them getting, let's say, a promotion. And I think that's one thing that I learned through conversations. I would say there's a lot of individuals that helped me learn that. One of my mentors, her name is Nancy Spahn. I love her to death, and she's helped me a lot in the journeys because she's always reminded me that your worth is always comes down to you as an individual. How much do you believe in yourself, and how much are you willing to push yourself and to learn, to grow, to climb the ladder, to get to that newer height, to that newer scenery, the mountain, or whatever it is. Like, how much are you willing to do that? So it really comes down to, yes, everyone I think needs to go out and ask for more and push for more. And one thing that I will say, and I'll say this very openly, is um, if any organization doesn't want to give you that opportunity, then I think you as an individual need to look at your future with an organization, because I think that says more about them than it says about you as an individual, right? No one should ever not want an employee to do more and want to get more done and exercise their learning capabilities. So I think that yes, there is a need for people to go and get more and do more, and just for like a learning standpoint for themselves, and that will always translate to just growth within the industry, whatever industry it is. It will always translate no matter what, because I'm a numbers guy, so I love numbers. And at the end of the day, like I play a lot of fantasy football, fantasy like basketball, everything. And every time my friends are like, "Oh, like your team's playing, team's not playing too well," I'm like, "Don't worry, man. It's a numbers game. I'm losing my weeks, but I'm hitting my numbers." And slowly, as you know, like it went from me being in last place to now me being in like I think like third place, because I'm still hitting my numbers and I'm still like, my guys are still doing the work. So at the end of the day, as long as you hit those numbers and push, it's an average thing. You'll get there. It may take time, but you will get there, and it will happen.
Yeah, I completely agree to everything, especially the fantasy, right? Where I have this certain categories I look for as long as I hit the numbers. That happens every year, right? Where fantasy projects me to be last place and you kind of come up the ladder. But going more so what you're saying about the career, I definitely agree with that. Where I myself, right? I kind of started the sports marketing company, and obviously starting a company, there's ups and downs, and especially last year there's a big down at one point where I was like, hey, like, I don't know about this. And I was speaking to everyone. I was like, hey, do you think maybe I should go get a job somewhere else?
Mhm.
Because then I can kind of gain that, let's say, experience. And everyone told me, they're like, do not do that. They're like, the amount of experience you're learning, because it's a hard role to fill, right? Starting an
Mhm.
agency on your own. So then the amount of things I'm learning every day, or the things people are asking me, like, I had an athlete, they're like, hey, can you do NFTs? This was like at the beginning. I was like, no, but I'll figure it out, right? And that
Mhm.
learning in that time frame allowed me to grow much quicker than I would anywhere else. And that's kind of the thing that you're saying, where by allowing yourself to be in this uncomfortable position, right? It's not this cushy job where I just come in, clock in 9 to 5. It's allowing me to grow at a much faster rate than I would have anywhere else. So I definitely
Mhm.
agree with that, where you got to find those areas, because if not, you're just going to get comfortable. You're going to sit there and you're not going to kind of develop. So I definitely agree with that.
There's a not to cut you off, but there's a I think an
Oh,
easy quote to sum up our conversation is someone said this, but I've heard it in many different ways. Comfortability is the enemy of growth.
mm,
Because whenever someone's comfortable, they don't want to grow. They're comfortable. They don't want to move from that position, right? It's perfect. It feels nice. It's gushy. It's nice. It's like a I'm happy where I'm at. But it change doesn't always net out to bad, and I think that's what a lot of people associate change with. They always think that, okay, if it's the concept of grass isn't always greener, it doesn't have to necessarily be like that, right? You don't have to always think about it like that. You always have to think about it like, well, change in itself is something where you're going to learn whatever it is. You're going to learn a lesson, right? If it's a lesson where you learn, okay, well, the grass wasn't green on the other side, you learned a lesson. And I think we're at a stage now with a lot of individuals that are like yourself, and other individuals. I think there's just we have enough career experience to be able to land that next job, to be able to land that next thing, and to still get back on track, if we think that we've come off track. So that's the way I always look at it: is that it's never the end of the world. Like, you fail, you fail, you'll come back and you'll figure it out again. It's bound to happen, and I always use super successful people to gauge myself and to figure out, okay, like, how should I do something. and I've heard of a lot of failure stories. Like a lot of them are like, oh, I failed in like this endeavor, I failed in this endeavor. And I've talked to like, sorry, I've read a lot of like successful people from like Jeff Bezos and all these other individuals, and they failed on this endeavor, they failed on this. Elon Musk, I know he's not a popular guy right now, but he's failed on a bunch of different things before he ended up getting to where he got to. So I think comfortability is the enemy of growth, and I do feel that everyone should get a bit uncomfortable and be willing to get uncomfortable and have those conversations and just dive in and see where it takes you, right? Because if you don't do it, you'll never know, as they say, right?
That's why Nike says it best, right?
They
Uh,
they do it the best, man. They do it the best. They
yeah.
got us buying their. I have like 7 boxes sitting right here.
Yeah, yeah. No, no, that's for sure. And maybe kind of going on that topic as well, one of the biggest things that you're kind of maybe referencing all your growth towards was, in fact, networking opportunities, right? You're saying, hey, this job came about or this one. So, do you mind maybe diving into your networking? Because I know when I first entered university, that's nothing they really end up teaching you. It was more so, hey, this is a networking event, go about it. So
Yeah,
for those listening, 'cause a lot of our listeners are those in school or those getting out of school, what were these networking opportunities, and how are you able to succeed and leverage them to getting for future opportunities?
for sure. So I'll be really honest, and I know other listeners can relate to this. I don't. I'm maybe you can relate to this as well, Chris. But my first networking event, I had no idea what the hell I was doing. I was like my half my handshakes were probably not even handshakes. I was like throwing fists, like I was just all over the place. I don't know what the hell I was doing, and that was probably super embarrassing, of course, because I'm like, okay, like what I need to like be to like fine tune this a bit, like figure out what I'm doing and how I want to present myself, how I want to go about, and what's my goal, right? What's my end goal? I think everything need to figure out end goal. So all my networking calls and all my networking coffees, meetings, anything that I would have that pertains to network, I always figure out a goal, and figure out what my goal is. Okay, if I'm gonna have a coffee with someone, what's my goal? Is it to pick their brain on an idea that I have? Is it to just get an idea of what their day to day life like work is like? Sorry, or is it to ask them for a job opportunity? Like, what is my goal? And once you have that goal, I think you sort of like reverse engineer it to like, okay, what kind of questions do I need to ask to get to my end goal? That's one of the things that I started using in my networking that really helped me, because it showed the individuals out that were that I was called out on it a couple times actually, where they said I really appreciated the fact that you told me what you were going to come to talk to me about. It allowed me to prepare to have the right answers for you. And it was and I was like, oh, okay, cool. Like once I noticed people calling that out, and making that a point of like reference for them to be like, okay, like you stand out because of X. I started doing it more and more, and I started realizing over time that uh, the biggest fear when you network is that everyone's scared to say something stupid. And now that I'm in the position that I'm in, I'm not saying that I'm in a position where like, oh, like everyone's reaching out to me to network, but I have individuals that reach out, and I have individuals that get put forth to like talk to like just get pick my brain and so on and so forth. And the first thing I tell them right away is I'm like, listen, don't worry about saying anything stupid, any mistakes, grammar, whatever it is. Don't worry about it. I don't care. I don't care, and I tell them that right away, and I can see like this relief that they get. It's like, okay, like he doesn't care. But the reason why I say that is because want people to understand, and I want them to know that a lot of other people also don't care. They don't necessarily care if you come in and you of course have to present yourself in a really proper manner, but don't kill yourself over the fact that okay, like I messed up and I said something wrong or something of that nature. Send an email and correct it, or do any of that stuff. It shows more on you as an individual when you do things like that. So my biggest point to networking is have a goal. Is what Sorry, what I did was I always had a goal, what my goal is for that conversation. Stopped caring about being wrong, and stopped caring about um, presenting myself in a way where I may not know something. I think that's another thing is a lot of people do come in and they're like and in some cases you need to know what you're talking about if you're going in for like more of a job conversation, like know what the hell you're talking about, right? But then there's other points where if you're going in to just ask someone on how their day to day is, it's okay to go in and not know. It's okay to go in and just ask more questions. Like if they mention to you, oh, like we do like my day to day involves budgets and so on and so forth. It's like, oh, it's okay, like how do budgets work? It's okay to ask those questions, right? I think a lot of people tend not to ask those questions, and that's where their value isn't. They don't really receive the right value that they should be for that time that they're putting in. So I think that's the other one. And then my last piece would be is to for anyone networking is to have is to always, and I tell, and this is one of my tips to everyone that asks me this question as well, actually, is find a person whose job you want and talk to them. um, that's one thing that every single person that is interested in networking should always do. If you're trying to be the GM of an NBA basketball team, do your darndest to go and try to get in conversation with one of those GMs. There's 32 teams, right? If I'm not mistaken, 32 teams. Try your darndest to get one. If you don't get the GM, try the assistant GM. If and like that's another what 100 and sorry no 32 60 64 opportunities. Again, going back to the math thing, it's like it's a you got 64 opportunities now. If you can't get the assistant GM, okay, get the vice president of player personnel. That's another. Every team has one, so that's another. Add another 32 teams, 32 people on that list. Try to get an interview with some of those with any of those people because that's the job you want, and try to figure out how and ask them like, how did you get to where you got to? What did you do? Have that goal coming in, and I think that's been super beneficial for me from a networking standpoint as well because I've talked to people whose jobs I want, and I've talked to them and I'm like, I want like I not that I want to steal your job, but I want to work where you're working. I want to do what you're doing. I want to do the things that you are working on a constant basis. And that's probably been the most beneficial because it's helped me. It's allowed me to have a more realer conversation because they know why I'm coming in there, and they're gonna do their darndest to give me as much detailed information as they can to help me in my journey. Because people, we as natural human beings, we want to help one another. It's in our nature. So I would encourage everyone to go and take advantage of that and really try to go down that route and really talk to as many people as possible and ask them as many questions as possible as well.
Yeah, no, like what you're saying there about your first networking event. I think I've said it on the podcast a few times. I had the same experience where I remember calling my dad. I was like, "Hey, I don't want to do this anymore because I went all the way to Toronto for an MLC event." And
Hmm.
he's like, "Just go talk to the first person you see." Just so
Yeah.
happens when I get up the stairs, there's a group of 20 people. I was like, "Oh well." I got into that 20 people. And then once you get in there, you break the ice. I'm sure I maybe said something like stumbled on my words or mumbled something like that, but the thing is you did it, and then I was fine from then on. So definitely when you're just talking about that made me chuckle. And then what you're saying as well from there, where that's how this podcast started initially, where I just kind of wanted to hear how people were able to go from point A to point B for jobs I wanted. But then obviously that's hopefully what people can do with this podcast, right? Maybe if they want to be in partnerships for a betting company, they can listen to this podcast and figure out how, you were able to do it, or anyone else, because that's why I'm always trying to get different guests. And even for me, now that I feel like I found my own lane, even just hearing how all these different people within sports or sports business operate, how their mind works for different things, there's always tidbits, even for myself, that I can kind of take away. So even though, let's say there's an episode or there's a person you want to have coffee with that isn't necessarily exactly what you want to do, it allows you maybe to kind of have a full scope of how it works, right?
Hmm.
If you want to be in partnerships, maybe listening to how someone in social media, plans it out or has their creatives, or even how even the GM, right? Because it's a business at the end of the day, how that all ends up working out. So, no, I definitely agree with all of that. And the last question I kind of want to get into before I have these final two questions I like asking every guest is
Yeah.
more so about your current role. So, what does that look like now? Because obviously it's an interesting space. It's very new, right? Especially in Canada. So, what does your, let's say, day to day, right, for someone listening that wants to hear about it, what does it look like working at BetRegal now for you?
So my day to day right now is managing our major partnerships, which are the CFL teams, Hamilton Tiger Cats, Winnipeg Blue Bombers, and then also PGA of Canada partnership, and managing these partnerships and ensuring that the partnerships are being leveraged in the best possible manner to achieve our business objectives and goals. So from that standpoint, it's to work with those teams and leagues and organizations to provide us an opportunity to face their consumers, showcase our product to the consumers, and help the consumers understand what we offer so that they can choose our product. That's essentially our goal, and my objective from a partnership standpoint. My day to day honestly is it's a little bit different. I will say versus what I've done in the past. Whereas in the past, working, because I come from an agency world where I've worked on different brands, so it's sometimes it's literally all hands on deck, Monday to Friday, sometimes even the weekend, just because of the amount of clients you work with. And so here it's a bit different in that I'm working on one brand, like I mentioned before, and trying to figure out the best way to present the brand. So on a day-to-day basis, it's a lot of um, team internal conversations, especially right now we're in a planning stage where we're planning for 2023. So it's a lot of internal conversations on how do we want to execute a promotion? How do we want to have a promotion live with one of our partners? How do we want to give away, let's say, tickets that we may have for X game? How do we want to leverage our partnerships that we have, because we have some digital partnerships as well? How do we want to leverage our digital partnerships for NFL playoff season? Things of that nature. So it's having those conversations with our design team, with our social team, and trying to figure out the best way to make those partnerships be as to work for us as much as they can, versus them just being there and having a bunch of our logos on there. So that's my biggest challenge slash day to day piece, is to make our partnerships be as beneficial to us and our objectives as possible. And then beyond that, it's honestly a lot of, once we do sort of get into the season, it's a lot of making sure that if we have an XM event, everything is going well with the XM event. Everything from like a BA standpoint, to the layout, to the approvals on logos, creative. How does the journey, consumer journey, look like for individuals? How does the consumer journey look like for individuals that go to the XM, and then from XM we want them to come to let's say our .net site where we have a free to play sports book. How does that journey look? What does that journey look like? How is it going to work? How are we going to make it as seamless as possible? So it's definitely an interesting experience, because before I was focused heavily on partnerships, whereas now I'm focused on partnerships, and I would say a little bit of like marketing, partnerships, brand as a whole. They all come together. And I think that's one of the things that I love about the space now, and sorry, the sports betting space, is because it's fairly new in the Canadian market, the regulated market. Um, it's learning a lot. Doing a lot of different things and bringing my expertise from a partnerships angle on the marketing side. Let's say just exclusively marketing side or digital side. So that's a lot of what my work is. And to be very honest with you, I love it. I love the fact that it's in the sports realm. It's very, very, very endemic to the sports itself. So it's not like, where in some cases I would be working with a brand that is selling something that is not part of the sports realm, and they're trying to leverage the sports audience. Whereas this one is like, no, you're selling a product that goes hand in hand with the viewing experience. So it's like trying to augment and help that viewing experience as much as we can, while growing the brand as much as we can, and as much as possible.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and it sounds like you're so passionate about it. So I'm sure a lot of people are going to enjoy this episode and hearing about all your experiences to date. But before I wrap it up, as promised, I got two questions I like to ask every single guest. So I'm pretty set. Everyone that knows me well, I'm set. I'm living till I'm 103 years old. I don't know why, but that's the number.
Yeah,
And I'm going to be on a rocking chair, enjoying life, just thinking about all the good times.
yeah.
So with that, you're in the same scenario. You're 103 as well. You're in a rocking chair, but you're thinking about your career, right? And everything you've done to date. What's maybe one story that's going to stand out to you that you're going to remember at 103 and you're going to be like, wow, what a career?
One story that I'm gonna remember.
Yep.
Um. Oh man. Honestly, it's probably a story with with my mentor, Nancy, who's become a friend now. But it was a story. So essentially, it was my that moment when I didn't get my internship, the ideal internship, the first internship, quote unquote, that I wanted. I didn't get that, and I remember calling her and just talking to her, and I was so down in the dumps, and I was like, I'm pretty sure I did bawl my eyes out, because to me it was like the end of the world. To me that moment was the end of the world. I was like, that's it. Like, I came to do this stuff. I couldn't do it. I'm not good enough. I can't do it. All these things. I was just, just being super negative about myself and everything that was going on. And I remember her telling me, she goes, and I still remember this, and I still share this with friends of mine. She goes, "Listen, I don't know why this is, and I'll tell this to my kids as well. I don't know why this is the case. I don't know why the world works like this, but the people that go through the hardest path end up becoming the most successful."
Hmm.
And that to me always has stuck and has always been something that I will always remember when I'm 103, because I know my path is not gonna be easy. I'm not gonna sit here and say, hey, I I do want it to be easy at the end of the day, but I know that at 103 I'm gonna sit there, I'm gonna realize the kind of person I am and the individual I am is it can all it's gonna all circle back to the path that I had and the journey that I had and the things that I did and the route that I took. It's gonna be all those things that make me who I am. And that conversation for that reason will always stick to me because it's literally the thing that I've realized is true is the people that end up becoming the successful individuals, they do go through the hardest path. My research has shown this from just talking to different people and just seeing how people got successful. And a lot of people think it happened, like that. But I talk to them and they tell me like, I failed doing this and I failed doing this. I was bawling my eyes out, and like, in my car, not knowing if I'm ever going to be able to do anything ever again. I have bills, I have this, and I'm like, damn, like I thought you were just, doing great when you just were born and everything was great, everything was hunky dory. They're like, no, man, like this is the journey I went through. This is the route I took, and that's why that moment is gonna stick with me. Um, Over like if I don't like my favorite athlete of all time is Cristiano Ronaldo. Like I
Hmm.
know if I meet Cristiano Ronaldo, I won't be like that's the moment that stuck with me. I know it was that moment when I was down in the dumps about an internship. Like some people will say stupid internship, but it was still an internship. Being a competitive guy, I was like, I can't believe I missed out on that. That moment will still stick to me when I'm 103 for sure.
Yeah, no, that's perfect, and that's why I asked that question. The last thing I have for you: you went to the
Yeah,
future, going to the past. You're talking to maybe 18-year-old Must is in that library talking about being a GM. If you go to that table where you're at that Scott library chatting with your friends, and you could just come back from the future at this present day and provide some piece of advice that you've now learned since then, what's one thing you'd share?
make mistakes.
Hmm.
And it's okay to make mistakes. I would because I coming up, I was always a risk averse person. I avoided risk as much as possible, um, and as you can probably tell from like from this conversation, I've become a little bit of a different individual now, where I'm down to take the risks. It is what it is, as they say.
Mhm.
But at that time, I did not want to take any risks. I did not want to make any mistakes. I came from this sports mindset where I was like, like you got to be perfect. Go take your throw the ball up 1,000 times if you need to be able to hit from short. Hit first. You got to throw it 1,000 times. Make sure you hit that throw. If it's running, catch, whatever it is, make sure you do it 1,000 times to make it perfect. Um, and I think in that process, I forgot that it's okay to make mistakes, because when you make mistakes, you learn more about yourself, you learn more about the people around you, you learn about um, what your real capabilities are, because now you've made a mistake, you got to fix it. How are you going to go
Mhm.
and fix it, and how are you going to problem solve? So I would definitely say is to I guess it goes into like take risks, but it's okay to make mistakes because they're going to happen, and you're going to learn from them more so than you are going to have them as a detriment to you in the long run.
Oh, that's why I asked these two questions then, because I think it puts a perfect bow on it. But yeah, this has been a fantastic episode, and I'm glad we got to connect because I think there's a lot of things we align with. And if there's anything else you'd like to share, by all means. But thank you so much for coming on episode 119.
No, I'll honestly, all I'm gonna add to that is I'm gonna go back to my networking piece just one quick second, because I've had a conversation with a lot of people recently, and I know a lot of people have faced challenges in getting roles. There's hiring freezes. There's all these things that are happening in the world right now that are impacting a lot of individuals in getting roles, getting their career jump started. What I would recommend to all those individuals is to one, not give up, because it will hit. Like I said before, it's a numbers game. It will hit. Out of the 100 interviews, you will get one that will matter and the one that will count. But just beyond that, I would say to those people as well is use this time to network as much as you can. Your network really is your net worth at the end of the day. So network as much as you can. Talk to as many people as you can. For one, because it will help you develop, and two, it will let you know who is on your side and who isn't. And I think that's a really strong thing that people need to know, is who is there to help you and who is not necessarily there to not help you, but they're just not someone that you want to pursue further as it pertains to that networking experience. Because I think a lot of people, I've noticed just talking to different individuals, they put a lot of worth into individuals that aren't necessarily there to help them, but just to give them their 30 minutes and then keep it moving. I think the networking piece will definitely help you, and having conversations will definitely help you understand who's there to help you and how you can leverage those individuals to help you, because there people are out there. There is a bigger chunk of people that are out there to help, aka yourself. Even putting something like this together and giving it out to people to consume on the different platforms that you mentioned, the Spotify's, the YouTubes, and so on and so forth. It just goes to show that there's people out there to help. You just got to go out and sort of bring the help forward, like bring it
Yeah.
out from them, and they will definitely help, and we will all get to the point that we want to get to, but not to lose sight. Is probably my last piece I just wanted to say, because I know it's been a tough time for everyone, and it's a lot of uncertainty. So would love to say that to everyone, is that just keep grinding and keep pushing. It will hit. It will happen. It's a numbers game at the end of the day.
Yeah, no, I think that's awesome. Where even what you're saying there, right? It kind of makes a lot of sense, even for my network, right? Where there's a lot of people, but then there's always maybe certain ones that are always there. Where last week, for example, someone shot me a text, and I wasn't there. I was in Toronto, as I mentioned. They're like,
Hmm.
"Hey, this person's telling me how proud they are of you and the work you've done." And you're like, "Oh wow, like I'm not
There you
even
go.
in the room, or they have nothing to benefit by like talking about me at that event, but." Like you're saying, there's some people that are always kind of in your corner. So no, that's awesome, and yeah, this has been fantastic, and I look forward to speaking again.
100%. I'm looking forward to it. Thank you again for having me on here. Thank you to your team. Thank you to everyone that makes the route function and everything that goes behind this, because I know it's not it's not easy. So thank you for that, and wish you nothing but the best of health. I know you mentioned a little bit earlier something that you're dealing with, so wish you nothing but the best on that front, and hope to see you back on. I see some sticks back there, so hope to see you back on the ice fairly soon.
Yeah, thank you.
Perfect. Thank